I'm going to talk a little bit about First Central and its relationship with eGain, but mainly I'm going to build on some of the themes from this morning around generative AI. And you can see over here, we're talking about redefining customer experience and operational performance with artificial intelligence. So Ashu, you set the stage perfectly, and I hope that I continue to build on that and you agree with the sentiment of the things that we're going to step through. But I suppose before we jump in, we just start with the current contact center landscape that I think we're all familiar with and operating within. And the first thing, one of the biggest changes over the last few years is that customers' patience has started to shorten a little bit. I know mine certainly has. And as other companies set higher and higher bars for what customer service can be and is, the days of being a little bit forgiving of the likes of insurance companies that are maybe a little bit older, have some tech infrastructure that's a bit dated and can't really provide that seamless service, those days are gone. And you have that kind of service with Amazon, and all of a sudden that is your new expectation, always and everywhere. And it's now our job to accelerate our journeys and our customer experience to get to that level, and hopefully, as we'll talk about a little bit, push beyond. Now, if I was to do this talk a year ago, I probably wouldn't have mentioned Gen AI, and unfortunately, I wasn't schooled on it. It was probably largely in the purview of the tech teams of large organizations. It wasn't at people's fingertips like it is today. And we'll talk about that accessibility being in the hands of millions and millions of people and why that's significant also. But in that world of increasing technology, increasing complexity, you've also got massive organizations. A lot of companies in here are huge organizations. You've got legacy technology to contend with. You have massive change programs and transformation agendas. And now, not only are there new distribution channels, in fact, I'd like to pause here and give a shout out to quite a few people in the eGain team, because First Central over the weekend upgraded to R21. And talking about new distribution channels, that's going to let us launch WhatsApp tomorrow. Which is very cool, and I know there are a lot of people in here who got sleepless nights and tired afternoons and into tired evenings, and very grateful for that. And we're really excited to launch that tomorrow. And building on that, you have these new contact channels, you have these new technologies. How do you make it all sing together? How do you make it so that customers are getting that seamless experience? It's not easy. I'm sure we're all in here hoping for answers, and we talked about it a little bit earlier today. There is that curve. Is generative AI going to be the thing that enables large organizations and small to turbocharge their customer experience by deploying it across the value chain in compelling ways? I think the answer to that is yes. And what I'm going to caveat now as part of this talk is we will talk about things like regulatory pressures and the need to use this in a moral and ethically sound way. But I also want to encourage, as part of this conversation, some unconstrained thinking. I want to pitch it to you guys as if we're going to be able to solve for those problems as we step through, and therefore deploy this in quite an ambitious and interesting way, just to stimulate some thought and have people take away maybe some considerations that they didn't have prior to this. And I will say, if you don't enjoy this talk, if people don't know Sujith Sadekar of eGain, that's ssadekar@egain.com, you can email him. It's his fault I'm here. So hopefully you can direct any hate mail to Sujith. But we're going to move on from that. Rich data, poor insight. Again, we've talked about the eGain analytics stuff, and I think a lot of people here will be familiar with this problem. Large, unstructured data sets that they cannot access, visualize, and interpret easily. Now, one of the most fascinating things about generative AI and where we're using it today is being able to try and interpret a lot of text-based, primarily conversational stuff, so web chat transcripts, calls, that kind of thing, into insight. And we'll talk about the specifics of that later. But the other aspect of that is generative AI is still early, so you can't necessarily hand it a massive CSV and say, put me together a bunch of wonderful graphs. And I think that's where the confluence of the technologies and the specialists of the likes of eGain, what we talked about earlier, can start to come into it. Regulatory pressures. It is really important that we do this in the right way, in the controlled way. Now, there is going to be a natural lag between the innovators on the front of the line trying to push the boundaries with this kind of technology and the regulators trying to catch up and ensure that they put a significant, robust wrapper around something that could potentially be used in harmful ways, but on the flip side, can also be used in remarkably benevolent and altruistic ways. So, we'll talk about First Central very quickly. Got about 1.25 million customers in general motor insurance, hoping to diversify our product set in the near future. We were, something I'm super proud of, 23rd place in the super large organizations for great places to work, which is, I was quite blown away by that personally, given the journey that we've been on, and our customers agree. So we've Trustpilot, excellent, 87,000 reviews, and we are happily award-winning in other areas. So hopefully that one speaks for itself. And we'll talk a little bit about the technology journey. So I touched on R21 and the WhatsApp implementation, but alongside that, we're also exploring with eGain things like the instant answers and turning things into, I've already been on to Sujith about the Assist GPT and the innovation in 30 days, and I've asked him if we can start both of those tomorrow. So hopefully we'll be able to move quite quickly on that. But our journey at First Central is largely focused around our platform, Focus, our in-house proprietary policy administration platform. And there are a number of shoot-offs to that that are quite significant for us. Having that in-house platform gives us a lot of flexibility and capability, and it means that we're quite well positioned to try and be on the front foot as it relates to new technologies. We're a young company, 15 years old in October. It's almost October. And as a result of that, we can try new things, we can fail fast, and we can test and learn, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in a second. So, what are the benefits? We've heard a lot about what it can do, and one thing worth addressing at the outset, and we kind of touched on it earlier with Ash's talk, is the potential implication for, we're talking customer contact, potential job losses in customer contact. Now, I'm a firm believer that whilst some roles may become less relevant, what we'll probably see is an expansion of other skills required. And my intention over the next few years with First Central in the retail operation is to try and use generative AI across some of those tasks and interactions that customers don't like having to wait on hold for anyway, and don't necessarily thrill our agents on the front line to have to do, and strip out some of that mundanity and let them focus on high-value interactions that require and warrant and benefit from empathy and human nuance, and pushing some of that mundanity out to enrich the roles of the individuals who are still required in the operation, and also become far more focused on the training, the learning, the development, the coaching across those critical touch points. And that's where we're thinking about AI in terms of supercharging our agents. We're focusing on trying to delight customers, reduce operational costs at the same time, and this is a rare moment in terms of the technology available to us that can probably achieve both of those things at the same time if deployed correctly. We've got a few different examples that we're working on just to bring this to life. I don't know, quick show of hands if people have managed to stay awake with me for 10 minutes. How many of you, thank you, no, I was going to say, that's good though, very responsive. So, quick show of hands, who has actually worked in a contact center and had to make notes after a call? Yeah, keep your hands up if you liked doing it. I saw one kind of there. Okay, so most of you put your hands down pretty immediately, right? So one of the things we're looking at doing is trying to take generative AI and take that role of creating a distillation of a summary of that call, taking that out of the agent's requirements. They'll check it, they'll be able to make sure it's valid, but there are two beautiful benefits to that from our perspective. Firstly, it's going to take their wrap time right down. So from an operational perspective, I'm very happy as from a P&L and ownership side, but you get consistency in the notes as well. So the quality that is, as we all know, so we've worked in contact center. I worked in one myself, and my notes were not great. I felt probably bad for everyone coming in after me trying to decipher them. And one of the things that we're looking at doing is not just summarizing it, reducing that wrap time, getting the consistency and the quality as a result of that, and freeing the agent up to take the next meaningful call. Everyone wins. Now, another thing that we're looking at doing is, again, we talked about it earlier, and people will have seen demos of it and so on, drafting email content. A lot of emails are, not quite a canned response, can't actually be the same every time, but broadly follows the same pattern. And again, allowing agents to have a draft put in front of them, something to work from, no blank piece of paper. We can bring the average handling time of those emails down. We can put it into a tone of voice that matches First Central. We can provide that level of consistency and harmony, and the customer gets something that's clear, that they can comprehend, that follows the pattern of the previous interaction they had and the one that they might have after. And that consistency in our brand and our tone of voice not only benefits us as First Central, but it provides the customer with assurance that we're joined up, and, again, it reduces some of that mundanity that the agent's having to step through. So this is a personalization at scale, which we have twice on there. We didn't initially, but it's clearly that important that in the final slides we wanted to duplicate it just so you all understand why it's so important to us. And I'm going to talk about something that I've pitched internally that's probably a few years away, but one of the things that I really like the idea of being able to do with this technology is having an ecosystem of data that is sufficiently connected that when a customer calls in, we have an idea as to what it is that they're probably calling us about based on their interactions. We're a motor insurer, so they are few and far between. You've got your renewal as the primary point. So we'll know that the customer's probably calling us, sticking with that example, about a renewal. We'll have the fact, I'd love to be able to bring in that their price has gone up by a certain percentage, and that as a result of that, they may be calling to seek a discount and then offer up to the specialist an immediate next best action where they can click a button and run a discount without having to go through what is currently a 10-ish minute process. So that's something that we're looking at doing. That's something that we'll probably be able to do using some of those technologies. But one of the other things that I love the idea of, that again, hopefully we'll be able to get to, I expect we will, I don't know how quickly, and we'll talk about the ethics and the explainability of models and why it might be a bit slower than I'd personally like, is being able to transcribe conversations live, push it into a GPT model, and get live prompts back to the specialists, to the agents, to suggest, let's say the conversation's getting a bit testy. Someone's price has gone up. Sorry, it's motor insurance. It's probably not the most thrilling for you guys, but someone's price has gone up, steep price. I want to be able to push that conversation live into a language model and push back some tailored content for the agent as a means of enhancing their objection handling. Maybe that customer has called in previously and we can leverage the information from the sentiment of those prior calls. Maybe that it's the agent that typically has something around the way they phrase certain things that we can propose they don't use with that particular conversation. And I'd love to get that level of real-time enhancement to what the agent is doing on a day-to-day basis to take some of those more complex moments and provide a little more safety to the individual, that they have more tools in their toolkit to manage the customer's expectations and deliver a seamless experience. So the personalization aspect, I think, can be huge, and the specificity to which I think you can probably arrive at that previously may have taken years of training an NLU program or testing and learning with different equipment. I think now, to the point we had flagged earlier, you have models that have over 1 trillion reference points that are going to be able to be taken, tailored, deployed in a safe and secure way, and put right at the front line to allow the agents to converge with the technology and deliver a really compelling and personal experience that feels the same every single time, no matter who the customer is in contact with. Cool. So I think the slides are a little bit out of order. One sec. Yeah, cool. I'll just rock with it. Could you scroll down a little bit? Anyway, okay, so the slides are a little bit out of order, apologies. So I suppose I'm going to tie in a couple different things now. There is myriad challenges ahead. One of the things that has to be solved for with a technology as powerful as this is the moral and ethical issues around it. So there is bias in the tool. We talked earlier about hallucinations when it makes things up, like occasionally we do on the spot, like I am now, because I think I got my slides out of order. But the probability of tackling that in the very, very near future is reasonably low, particularly for the more heavily regulated industries out there. You know, there's a huge focus, certainly in financial services, on vulnerable customers. And being able to assure both the customer, but also the regulator, that we're meeting our moral duty of servicing vulnerable customers in a fair and unbiased way requires the ability to explain the model. And to the point Ash you made earlier, unless you are one of the deep expert companies that build these models, presently that transparency isn't really there. So there is a requirement to, and one of the things First Central is presently doing is to sandbox the content and ensure it does not reach a customer without a very strict level of control around the actual response going out. So coming back to the moral aspect, you know, how do we make sure that customers are being treated fairly? I think it's fair to say that there's a journey to go on, but I don't believe it's one that is insurmountable, and I expect that touching on the fact that this is in the hands of millions of people now. You know, we saw the raise of hands earlier today in terms of who's got an account on ChatGPT, and the fact that machine learning, big data, the things that kind of came before this as AI, they were largely the purview of big corporations, highly trained and sophisticated individuals who'd been through a lot of education in terms of how to use it. Now, one of the things that I haven't pointed out is you'll see these images, all of these images that we've had throughout the presentation. I made all of these. I'm not a graphic designer. I have no training in graphic design. I downloaded an AI image generator, and I popped some words in, and it spat out these. Now, I didn't do any refined prompt engineering. I didn't put an aperture lens, or I didn't put a contrast ratio. I didn't get scientific with it. I just popped them in. This one was literally, the prompt was, benefits of leveraging AI. Now, the reason I'm coming back to this, the reason I think it's interesting, the reason I think it's important is you might have something in your head. You know, you might not be amazingly literate at Excel, but you know what you want from the data. And if you could just ask it and have it tell you without the need of years of training in terms of manipulating and extracting from unstructured data, you'd level up, right? You'd be more productive. You'd be able to get things done at pace. You wouldn't have to put, I don't know what it's like for you guys, you wouldn't have to put a ticket request into a data team and wait for it to be prioritized. That's pretty compelling in terms of how we're going to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis, empowering individuals that previously they had stuff in their head. I'm not sure I quite had this in my head, but they had stuff in their head. They had creativity, or they had a thought, or they had a concept, and they didn't quite know how to start with a blank piece of paper. They don't have to anymore. There is an opportunity to unleash creativity on a new level. I'm not quite sure I reached that level with these pictures, but it's illustrative of the fact that the technology is now at people's fingertips. And back to the point that it used to be the purview of large corporations or people with sophisticated training. You know, we're all racing to figure out how to use this best. And by having it in the hands of millions of people, the use cases that are being tested and the hypotheses that are being worked right now across the globe allow for an explosion of that opportunity, and people will crack it, and they're going to crack it quite quickly. So from First Central's perspective, we're racing to get to the front of this because whoever nails it is going to realize, as we talked about, operational efficiency, customer experience enhancement, and overall improvement of service in the extreme. And from my perspective, I don't want to age myself. I'm not sure I was around when the internet was actually created, but it is more significant as a moment in terms of what we're going to be able to do with that. You know, the internet was foundational. It gave us all a space to communicate and to interact across the globe instantaneously. This is a supercharged tool that will be deployed across myriad use cases. And from my perspective, for First Central's perspective, we see it as probably the single biggest opportunity for customer experience. I'll say ever, mainly because I wasn't around when the internet was created. However, there are still challenges, and we do need to understand that new skills will be needed. You know, prompt engineering will become a full-time role. Getting those queries right, making them tailored to extract exactly what you need from that data is going to become an art form. And that might mean that, you know, I've got generative AI doing a lot of my web chats back to my customers. I might not need as many web chat people. But to the conversation that Ashu so eloquently touched on, so I won't labor the point, the overall economy will find a way to stabilize. And a little bit like when we put social media in the hands of millions of people, you know, I don't know how grateful we all are that influencers exist, but that was not a job. And then it was put in, you know, everyone got Instagram, and all of a sudden people can make a living out of something that did not exist before. We create new economies, and this will be no different. It's an enabling technology that I'm hopefully imparting upon you that people shouldn't be scared of. They should be really excited that they can lean into something that's going to save them time and make their lives easier. And I don't know, I know we had a lot of people raise their hands in terms of, do you have a ChatGPT account? How many of you use it as a show of hands and then a check after 20 minutes if you're still with me? How many people use it on a regular basis? I say regular, a few times a week. That is very, very good news. That excites me because I think that the more people that are using it and normalizing it, making it clear that it's not something to be afraid of, that it's a tool. You know, if we talk about job, I remember reading a quote. I think it was Aristotle, and I'm ashamed it's recorded in case I get this wrong. I'm going to say it was Aristotle. Around that time, they invented writing on tablets, rock tablets. This is not iPads. And there was a quote around that time that the next generation is never going to remember anything because they can write down all their thoughts and they don't need to remember a thing again. They're going to be stupid. Their brains are going to erode. You know, I've heard a lot of people say something similar around generative AI, like, I'm not going to have to think about anything ever again. It's simply not the case. You know, we've seen a few technologies come that have allowed that certain acceleration. You know, I'm not sure writing on a rock tablet can be equivocated to Gen AI, but the point is the same, that you use it as a tool. It's a foundation. It helps you start from, instead of a blank page, something pretty crisp and well-defined. And as a result of that, we can take that technology and we can deploy it across the value chain, and we can, as I said earlier, unleash a brand new customer experience. So how much AI is too much AI? I think that's to be determined. It's probably something that people will become more comfortable with as we go through. You know, a lot of people are still scared of it. And most people, when you say artificial intelligence, probably think of something like the Terminator and probably don't think about a large language model that can tell me why my customers on my renewal journey are grumpy. I think about it a lot more as the latter than the former, and hopefully over time more people will too. So what is around the corner? We talked about the Turing test being passed by GPT-4. That's a vast and significant moment in terms of the threshold with which we have crossed and the capability that sits at your fingertips right now should you choose to access it. But for a customer experience perspective, what that means for us, if we can deploy it across things like web chat, chatbot, email, I'd love to see it over the next couple of years come into voice as well and have a GPT-based conversational bot that can take some of those mundane voice conversations out. What that means for us is that we can be 24/7, all the time. Whenever the customer wants to speak to us and be serviced, we don't need people who are awake and in the right time zone and operationally, marginally ROI beneficial. We can do it all the time, anytime, whenever they want to, using some of these tools. And I think that one of the most important things in that erosion of the human and the AI is to emphasize that whilst I've talked and waxed lyrical about it, because I said I was going to be pretty unconstrained, the demand for human nuance and human empathy, even in motor insurance, is never going to disappear. There will always be that need for a human on the other side, and when there is, we can give them better tools now. And when there isn't, when customers want something instantly and they expect it instantly, we have a new vehicle by which we can deliver that. So I suppose, and of course, yeah, we don't need to have, we're a UK-based company, so we don't need particularly a lot of multilingual support, but to have a large language model that can essentially interpret any language and allow them to communicate in their native tongue and translate that into something that a Gen AI model can then interpret effectively is going to be fairly transformative for international businesses. And as we all know, the amount of data this thing can interpret and ingest is pretty unreal. And the sophistication with which people will be able to articulate data in the near term out of unstructured data sets. I've seen a couple of examples where you can chuck data at things and say, show me this, is going to be fairly critical in terms of amplifying our ability to make strategic decisions using quantitative data that was previously out there and you knew it was out there in your data lake, or you wanted to go and have a swim around, but you didn't have armbands, you've never been taught to swim. This is kind of going to be some armbands, this is kind of going to be some swimming lessons, and we're probably going to be able to generate some vast insight without the need for huge amounts of data analytics and training. So, how do we finish a talk that's this full on about generative AI? We asked ChatGPT how to finish it. And I gave it a prompt. I gave it a prompt this morning, and thank you to our showrunners at the back for accommodating my change in slides. I asked it to write a compelling, profound, and somewhat inspirational quote to finish a presentation about redefining customer experience and operational performance through the symbiotic combination of market-leading AI technologies and human expertise. I said, the talk is being presented to a group of sophisticated, that's you guys, sophisticated senior managers at a key annual conference. The quote should make the speaker seem highly refined and well-informed. I know I probably haven't hit that last mark yet, but I'm pleased to say ChatGPT did not let me down. In an era where technology and human convergence, let us remember it is not the AI that defines the pinnacle of success, but the harmonious dance between machine precision and human intuition. Together, they craft an unparalleled symphony of experience and efficiency. Thank you very much.